The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain of Devil's Canyon as Tom Mitchell guided his horse along the rocky trail. As a range stockman for the Lazy R Ranch, he had ridden these paths countless times, checking on cattle and monitoring the vast expanse of Arizona territory. But today felt different. The usual sounds of the wilderness seemed muted, and an unsettling quiet hung in the air. Tom pulled his hat down against the glare and urged his mount forward. He had been tracking a small group of strays that had wandered into this remote area, following their hoofprints through the scattered mesquite and prickly pear. The canyon offered good grazing but was known for its hidden dangers and unpredictable flash floods during the rainy season. As he rounded a bend in the trail, Tom's horse suddenly reared, snorting nervously. Through the dust and confusion, he spotted movement in a cluster of rocks ahead. His hand instinctively moved to the rifle secured to his saddle, but what he saw made him pause. 7 young Apache girls, ranging in age from perhaps 8 to 16, huddled together in the meager shade of an overhanging boulder. The girls were clearly frightened, their dark eyes wide with fear as they watched him approach. Their traditional clothing was torn and dusty, suggesting they had been traveling for some time. The eldest girl stepped protectively in front of her younger sisters, her chin raised defiantly despite the obvious exhaustion etched on her face. Tom slowly dismounted, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He had learned some Apache words during his years on the frontier and had always maintained peaceful relations with the local tribes. Something about this scene troubled him deeply. These girls were alone, without the protection of their family or tribe, in territory that was becoming increasingly dangerous for Apache people. "Water," the eldest girl said in broken English, pointing to her sisters. Her voice was hoarse, and Tom could see the desperation in her eyes. He immediately reached for his canteen, offering it to them without hesitation. As they drank gratefully, he noticed fresh rope burns on the wrists of several girls and bruises that spoke of rough handling. While the girls rested and drank, Tom's mind raced. He knew the political climate in Arizona territory had grown increasingly hostile toward Apache people. The government's policies were forcing many tribes onto reservations, often separating families and disrupting centuries-old ways of life. But these girls appeared to be fleeing from something more immediate and dangerous. Through a combination of broken English, Apache words, and gestures, Tom began to piece together their story. They had escaped from a group of white men who had captured them near their village. The men spoke of selling them to work in distant places, far from their homeland and families. The eldest sister, who gave her name as Iana, explained that their parents had been killed in a raid, leaving them orphaned and vulnerable. As Tom listened, his anger grew. He had heard rumors of unscrupulous traders who exploited the chaos of frontier life to profit from human misery. These men would capture Apache children and women, claiming they were rescuing them from savage conditions, only to sell them into indentured servitude or worse, to settlements and mining camps that needed cheap labor. The scheme was as heartless as it was profitable. The perpetrators would often work with corrupt officials who would provide false documentation, making their crimes appear legal. They preyed on the fact that few people cared about the welfare of Apache children, and those who might object were often too far away or too powerless to intervene effectively. Tom realized that these 7 sisters represented more than just individual lives in danger. They were evidence of a systematic operation that was likely claiming many more victims. As he looked at their faces, he saw not just fear but also hope, beginning to kindle as they recognized his intention to help rather than harm them. The sun was climbing higher, and Tom knew that staying in the open canyon would be dangerous for all of them. The men who had been pursuing the girls might still be in the area, and the harsh desert environment was unforgiving to those without proper supplies and shelter. He needed to act quickly to ensure their safety and find a way to expose the criminal operation that had torn these sisters from their home. As he prepared to lead them to safety, Tom made a silent promise to himself and to these brave young women. He would not only protect them from immediate danger, but would also work to bring justice to those responsible for their suffering. The frontier might be wild and lawless in many ways, but he believed there were still good people willing to stand. Up for what was right, regardless of race or politics? Tom led the 7 Apache sisters through winding mountain paths toward Hidden Springs, a secluded water source he had discovered years earlier during his work as a range stockman. The natural spring was surrounded by thick vegetation and rock formations that provided excellent concealment, making it an ideal temporary refuge. As they traveled, he remained constantly alert for signs of pursuit, his eyes scanning the horizon for dust clouds or other indicators that the men who had captured the girls might still be tracking them. The journey took most of the afternoon, with frequent stops to allow the younger girls to rest. Tom shared his meager trail rations with them, watching as they ate hungrily. It was clear they had not been properly fed during their captivity. Ayanna, the eldest sister, stayed close to his side, translating his words and intentions to her younger siblings in their native Apache tongue during one of their rest stops. Ayanna revealed more disturbing details about their captors. She described a man with a distinctive scar across his left cheek who seemed to be the leader of the operation. This man, whom the others called Brennan, had boasted about the money he would make from selling Apache children to mine owners and ranchers who wanted cheap workers. They could control completely. The girls had been held in a temporary camp with other captured Apache, women and children. Ayanna estimated that at least 20 other people were still being held prisoner, including some from neighboring tribes. The camp was heavily guarded, and escape seemed impossible until a violent thunderstorm provided the distraction the 7 sisters needed to slip away under cover of darkness and rain. As they reached Hidden Springs, Tom felt a mixture of relief and growing determination. The clear, cool water bubbled up from underground sources, creating a small oasis in the harsh desert landscape. Towering cottonwood trees provided shade, and the surrounding rocks offered natural protection from both the elements and unwanted visitors. He had often used this spot as a base camp during extended cattle drives, and he knew it would serve their needs well. Tom helped the girls settle in for the night, showing them how to build a small, smokeless fire using dry wood and proper ventilation techniques. He taught them to recognize the plants and roots that were safe to eat, supplementing their limited food supplies with natural resources from the area. Despite their ordeal, the sisters showed remarkable resilience and adaptability, quickly learning the survival skills he shared with them. As darkness fell, Tom sat with Ayanna near the fire while her younger sisters slept. She told them about their life before the tragedy that had befallen their family. Their father had been a respected hunter and their mother known for her skill in traditional crafts. The family had lived peacefully, following seasonal migration, patterns that their people had practiced for generations. The attack on their village had come without warning. Armed men had ridden in during the early morning hours, killing anyone who resisted and rounding up the women and children like cattle. Ayanna's voice trembled as she described watching their parents fall while trying to protect them. The trauma was still fresh, and Tom could see the pain in her eyes as she relived those terrible moments. Tom listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. He knew this information would be crucial if he was going to expose the criminal operation and bring the perpetrators to justice. But he also recognized that his immediate responsibility was to ensure the safety of these 7 brave young women who had endured so much throughout the night. Tom maintained a careful watch, taking turns with Ayanna to ensure their camp remained secure. He had positioned himself where he could observe the main approaches to Hidden Springs, while remaining concealed from potential threats. The desert night was full of sounds, coyotes calling in the distance, the rustle of small animals moving through the brush, the gentle whisper of wind through the cottonwood leaves. As dawn approached, Tom made a difficult decision. He needed to leave the sisters temporarily to gather supplies and seek help from trusted allies. The girls would be safer remaining hidden at Hidden Springs than attempting to travel with him to populated areas, where they might be recognized by the wrong people before departing. Tom carefully explained his plan to Ayanna. He would ride to the town of Prescott, where he knew Sheriff Williams to be an honest man who might listen to their story. He also planned to contact Father Martinez at the local mission, who had a reputation for helping displaced Native American families. These men represented the best hope for legitimate assistance, without falling into the hands of corrupt officials who might be connected to the trafficking. Operation Tom left the girls with his extra ammunition, detailed instructions for staying hidden, and a promise to return within 3 days. As he mounted his horse and prepared to leave Hidden Springs, he looked back at the 7 sisters who had already endured so much. Their courage and determination, in the face of unimaginable hardship, had touched something. Deep within him, the morning sun was beginning to warm the desert as Tom rode toward an uncertain confrontation with forces that had turned human suffering into profit. He carried with him not just the hope of 7 Apache sisters, but the responsibility to expose a system of cruelty that threatened countless other innocent lives across the frontier. Tom rode hard toward Prescott, his mind churning with questions about how best to approach the delicate situation. The town was bustling with activity when he arrived, miners and ranchers conducting business while territorial officials moved between government buildings with an air of importance. Tom knew he had to be extremely careful about whom he trusted, as corruption often reached into unexpected places. His first stop was the sheriff's office, where he found Sheriff Williams reviewing wanted posters and legal documents. Williams was a weathered man in his 50s who had earned respect for his fairness in dealing with both white settlers and Native American tribes. When Tom knocked on the door, the sheriff looked up with curiosity. Recognizing him as one of the more reliable stockmen in the region, Tom chose his words carefully, explaining that he had discovered evidence of criminal activity involving the kidnapping and trafficking of Apache people. He described finding the 7 sisters without initially revealing their exact location, testing Williams' reaction to gauge whether he could be trusted completely. The sheriff's response was encouraging. His face darkened with genuine anger as he listened to the account of systematic abuse and exploitation. However, Williams also revealed troubling information that confirmed Tom's worst fears about the scope of the criminal operation. The sheriff had been receiving reports from other areas about missing Apache families and individuals, but had been frustrated by a lack of cooperation from certain territorial officials. Some complaints had mysteriously disappeared from official records, and witnesses had sometimes refused to testify after receiving visits from unknown men. Williams suspected that the trafficking network included corrupt government officials who were either directly profiting from the scheme or being bribed to look the other way. The operation appeared to have connections reaching into multiple territories, with victims being moved along established routes to distant locations where they could be exploited without fear of discovery or rescue. Tom's next visit was to Father Martinez at the San Miguel Mission, a small but influential religious establishment that had served as a sanctuary for displaced families of various backgrounds. The priest was a small, energetic man with graying hair and compassionate eyes who had spent decades working with Native American communities. His reputation for honesty and courage made him a natural ally in the fight against injustice. Father Martinez listened intently as Tom described the situation with the 7 Apache sisters. The priest's knowledge of local politics and social dynamics proved invaluable as he helped Tom understand the complex web of interests that allowed such criminal operations to flourish. Territorial expansion and the discovery of valuable mineral deposits had created an environment where some people viewed Native American lives as obstacles to progress rather than human beings deserving of protection. The priest revealed that he had been documenting similar cases for months, collecting testimony from survivors and witnesses who had managed to escape or had been rescued from various forms of exploitation. His records showed a pattern of organized criminal activity that extended far beyond the immediate region, involving what appeared to be a sophisticated network of traders, corrupt officials, and unscrupulous business owners. Together, Tom, Sheriff Williams, and Father Martinez began piecing together the structure of the trafficking operation. They identified key figures, including the scarred man named Brennan, whom Mayana had described, and traced connections between various incidents that had previously seemed unrelated. The evidence suggested that victims were often processed through temporary camps before being distributed to different locations based on their age, gender, and perceived value as laborers. During his investigation, Tom also discovered that legitimate businesses were unknowingly supporting the criminal network by purchasing goods and services from operations that relied on trafficked labor. Mine owners and large ranchers sometimes dealt with labor contractors who promised cheap workers without asking too many questions about where these workers came from or why they accepted such poor conditions. The economic incentives were disturbing but clear. Apache people, particularly women and children, could be acquired through violence and deception, then sold to operations that needed workers who had no legal protections or means of escape. The profits from this human trafficking helped fund further criminal activities, creating a self-sustaining cycle of exploitation and abuse. As the three men discussed their options, they realized that exposing the network would require careful coordination and substantial evidence that could not be dismissed or suppressed by corrupt officials. They needed to document the crimes thoroughly while simultaneously ensuring the safety of victims and witnesses who might face retaliation for speaking out against powerful interests. Tom felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier as he learned about the full scope of the criminal operation. The 7 Apache sisters he had rescued represented just a small fraction of the people who were suffering under this system of organized cruelty. However, their testimony and the evidence he could provide about their captors might serve as the key to unraveling the entire network. Time was running short. As Tom had promised to return to Hidden Springs within 3 days, the sisters were depending on him not just for immediate protection, but for the hope that their terrible experiences might lead to justice and prevent similar tragedies from befalling other families. The challenge now was to build a case strong enough to overcome the corruption and indifference that had allowed such crimes to flourish in the frontier territories. Tom returned to Hidden Springs on the 3rd day as promised, but he was not alone. Sheriff Williams and Father Martinez had insisted on accompanying him, along with 2 deputized volunteers who could be trusted to maintain secrecy about the operation. They approached the hidden spring carefully, using signals Tom had arranged with Ayanna to avoid startling the sisters who had been living in constant fear of recapture. The reunion was emotional but cautious. The 7 Apache girls had spent 3 days in a state of heightened alertness, taking turns watching for any signs of danger while sustaining themselves on the survival skills Tom had taught them and the natural resources available near the spring. When they recognized Tom's voice calling softly in the distance, relief flooded their faces, though they remained wary of the strangers he had brought with him. Ayanna approached the group first, her protective instincts keeping her between her younger sisters and the newcomers until Tom could properly introduce Sheriff Williams and Father Martinez. The language barrier initially created some tension, but Father Martinez surprised everyone by speaking several words in Apache, having learned basic phrases during his years of missionary work. This small gesture helped establish trust and showed his genuine respect for their culture. Sheriff Williams was visibly moved as he listened to the sisters' accounts of their ordeal. Through Ayanna's translation and Tom's interpretation, the girls provided detailed descriptions of their captors, the location of the temporary camp where they had been held, and the routes used to transport victims. Their information corroborated much of what the 3 men had already discovered during their investigation in Prescott. However, the peaceful reunion was interrupted by disturbing news. One of the deputized volunteers, a young man named Danny Peterson, who knew the territory well, reported seeing signs of a search party moving through the area. Fresh horse tracks and abandoned campsites suggested that Brennan and his associates were actively hunting for the escaped sisters, likely realizing that their testimony could expose the entire criminal operation. The immediate danger forced a change in plans. Originally, Tom and his allies had hoped to safely escort the sisters to the mission in Prescott, where Father Martinez could provide sanctuary while they built their legal case. Now they realized that moving the girls through open territory would expose them to capture or worse. Brennan's men would be watching the main trails and might have supporters watching the towns as well. Father Martinez proposed an alternative that demonstrated the broader network of decent people who were opposed to the trafficking operation. He revealed that several other religious establishments and reform-minded citizens throughout the territory had been quietly working to assist victims of various forms of exploitation. These informal allies included teachers, doctors, honest businessmen, and even some government officials who had become disgusted with the corruption they witnessed. The priest had been in communication with these allies through coded messages and trusted intermediaries, building a support network that could provide safe passage and temporary shelter for people fleeing from criminal operations. This underground railroad of sorts had already helped dozens of victims escape to safer locations, though always at considerable risk to those involved. One of the most promising contacts was Dr. Sarah Chun, a Chinese-American physician who ran a small medical clinic in a mining town 2 days' ride to the east. Dr. Chun had immigrated to Arizona territory to escape discrimination in California and had built a reputation for treating patients regardless of their race or ability to pay. Her clinic had served as a refuge for various displaced families, and she had medical training that could help treat the trauma and physical effects of the sisters' ordeal. Another potential ally was James Running Bear, an Apache man who had managed to establish himself as a successful trader while maintaining connections with both white and Native American communities. Running Bear had been secretly gathering information about missing tribe members and had developed his own network of contacts who could provide assistance and protection. His bicultural knowledge made him particularly valuable in navigating the complex social and political dynamics of the situation. As night fell at Hidden Springs, the group faced a critical decision about their next move. Tom's instincts as a stockman told him that staying in one location too long would eventually lead to discovery, especially with an organized search party actively hunting for the sisters. However, moving 7 traumatized young women through hostile territory required careful planning and reliable support. Sheriff Williams had brought legal documents that could provide some protection if they encountered honest officials. But everyone understood that corrupt authorities or criminal associates would not be deterred by paperwork. The sisters would need to be prepared for the possibility of another escape attempt if they were discovered during transport. Ayana proved once again that she possessed remarkable courage and practical wisdom beyond her years. She listened carefully to the adults' discussions and then spoke directly to Sheriff Williams through Tom's translation. She wanted assurance that any action they took would not only protect her sisters but would also help rescue the other victims still being held in the trafficking camps. Her words reminded everyone that the 7 Apache sisters represented just the beginning of what needed to be a much larger rescue and justice operation. The evidence they could provide was valuable, but the ultimate goal had to be dismantling the entire network and ensuring that future families would be protected from similar crimes. As they prepared for what could be a dangerous journey to Dr. Chin's clinic, Tom looked at the faces around the dying fire. The 7 sisters, Sheriff Williams, Father Martinez, and the volunteers represented a small but determined group of people who refused to accept injustice as an inevitable part of frontier life. Their alliance crossed racial, cultural, and religious boundaries, united by a shared commitment to human dignity and the rule of law. The pre-dawn darkness was pierced by the careful movements of Sheriff Williams' rescue team as they approached Brennan's trafficking camp from multiple directions. Tom positioned himself on a ridge overlooking the main entrance, while Running Bear and 2 volunteers circled around to block potential escape routes through the canyon's narrow passages. Ayana had insisted on accompanying the team despite the dangers, her knowledge of the camp's layout proving invaluable for planning their approach. The camp was larger than expected, consisting of several crude wooden structures and canvas shelters, scattered around a central area where guards maintained watch over their captives. Cook fires had burned down to glowing embers, and most of the criminals appeared to be sleeping except for 2 sentries who walked lazy patrol routes around the perimeter. The relaxed attitude of the guards suggested they felt secure in their remote location and confident that the escaped sisters posed no immediate threat. Sheriff Williams had coordinated the timing carefully, waiting until the guards completed their patrol cycle before signaling the beginning of the assault. The first phase involved Tom and Running Bear quietly neutralizing the sentries without raising an alarm that might endanger the victims held in the various structures. Both men were skilled in silent movement from their years of frontier experience, and they accomplished their task with professional efficiency. Once the perimeter was secure, Williams led the main rescue team into the camp while maintaining strict discipline to avoid accidentally harming the people they were trying to save. They encountered brief resistance from several armed criminals, but the coordination and determination of the rescue team quickly overwhelmed Brennan's associates. The scarred leader himself attempted to escape on horseback but was intercepted by Running Bear, who had anticipated this route based on Ayana's intelligence. The condition of the rescued victims was heartbreaking but not unexpected. 23 Apache individuals, ranging from young children to elderly adults, were freed from the various structures where they had been held in deplorable conditions. Many showed signs of malnutrition and abuse, while others appeared to be in states of shock from their prolonged captivity. Dr. Chun's medical preparations proved essential as the rescue team provided immediate care and comfort to people who had suffered unimaginable hardships. Ayana's reunion with other members of her extended tribe was particularly emotional. She discovered cousins and family friends among the captives, confirming that the trafficking operation had systematically targeted specific Apache communities. The criminals had apparently identified villages that were isolated and vulnerable, then launched coordinated attacks designed to capture as many people as possible while eliminating potential witnesses. The evidence recovered from the camp exceeded everyone's expectations. Brennan and his associates had kept detailed records of their criminal activities, including financial accounts that documented payments from corrupt officials and business owners who purchased trafficked individuals. These records provided clear proof of the network's scope and identified numerous accomplices who had previously escaped suspicion. Among the most damning evidence were letters from territorial officials, who had helped facilitate the trafficking operation by providing false documentation and blocking legitimate investigations. The correspondence revealed a level of institutional corruption that shocked even Sheriff Williams, who had suspected that some government figures were involved but had not imagined the extent of their complicity. Father Martinez arrived with additional volunteers and medical supplies just as the rescue operation was concluding. His network of reform-minded allies had mobilized impressive resources, providing transportation, temporary shelter, and ongoing support for the rescued victims. The response demonstrated that corruption and cruelty had not eliminated the capacity for decent people to work together for justice. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive, aided by the overwhelming evidence and testimony from multiple victims. Brennan and his immediate associates received lengthy prison sentences, while several corrupt officials faced criminal charges that ended their careers and led to significant reforms in territorial administration. The newspaper coverage generated by the case helped expose similar operations in other regions and contributed to broader changes in policies affecting Native American communities. Dr. Chung coordinated medical care and rehabilitation services for all the rescued individuals, working with tribal leaders and government agencies to ensure that people were reunited with surviving family members or placed with appropriate communities. The 7 Apache sisters who had started this chain of events remained together under Dr. Chun's care until arrangements could be made for their long-term welfare. Tom continued his work as a range stockman, but his role in exposing the trafficking network earned him respect throughout the territory and beyond. He maintained correspondence with the rescued families and contributed to ongoing efforts to prevent similar crimes. His simple decision to help 7 frightened girls had evolved into a sustained commitment to protecting vulnerable people from exploitation. The transformation of the 7 Apache sisters was remarkable to witness. Under proper care, and with the support of their extended community, They began to heal from their trauma while maintaining the courage and resilience that had enabled their escape. Ayanna eventually became a teacher and advocate for Native American rights, using her experiences to help others while working to prevent future injustices. Running Bear expanded his trading business and used his success to support other Native American families who faced various forms of discrimination and hardship. His bicultural knowledge and network of contacts made him an effective advocate for peaceful coexistence and mutual understanding between different communities. The success of the rescue operation and subsequent legal proceedings demonstrated that justice was possible even in the challenging environment of the frontier territories. The alliance between people of different races, religions, and backgrounds had proven stronger than the forces of corruption and exploitation. While the victory was significant, everyone involved understood that vigilance would be required to prevent similar crimes from emerging in the future. Years later, when Tom reflected on those dramatic days, he realized that his encounter with the 7 Apache sisters had changed not just their lives, but his own understanding of justice and human dignity. The frontier might be wild and dangerous, but it also provided opportunities for people to make moral choices that could transform entire communities and create lasting positive change.